Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first HGC post show for 2018, HG post show number 1. And for those of you who are new, the format is pretty simple. I talk about the results from each region one at a time. I usually start with Korea and then move on to Europe and NA, the same order they were aired in. I recommend one series that everyone should watch from each region. I will be doing China starting next week, but it started on Monday, so it's kind of weird. Technically, it has been played. I think most of the games have been played with the current format, but I'm just going to start it next week. So I will do every single region. We'll talk a little bit about the meta. If you go to my Discord, there is a channel called Post Show Questions. If you have questions as the matches are happening, you can post them there, and they'll be answered immediately after I go over the sort of the meta-specific and region-specific things that have been happening. And then after that, I open up the questions to Twitch chat, spend a little bit of time on that, and that's the show. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing terribly fancy. So first things first. Korea, 8 teams. Ballistics returning. KSV Black is MB Black, again returning. Team Ace, Team Feliz, and Gluck all came in from the Open Division. 2 of them won their Open Division Crucible matches 4-0, and I think it was Ace came in because Mighty disbanded, so they're the third place Open team. No one really expecting very much from them yet. Miracle, Blossom, and Tempest, of course, also returning as well. It seems the story of Korea has always been there's 3 teams, and then there's everyone else. I think that's looks like it's going to change this year. It looks like the gap has closed at least somewhat, and we're going to start to see some interesting things. So first off, the series of the week that I recommend watching is Tempest versus KSV Black. Tempest ends up dominating this 3-0. The only close game was game 1, which KSV Black was in fact winning from beginning to almost the end. And Tempest literally had one good team fight. Literally one good team fight. And from that point onward, they were able to come back and win the game. I might actually go over that team fight in a little bit because I think it's really interesting. We're gonna keep an eye on that. And in game 2, they won with a really cool combination, specifically designed to counter Lucio, and it was Judgment Tyrael plus Hinterland's Blast Falstad. Turns out that is a real combo that can be run in pro play and can win games. We hadn't seen things like that because of the double support meta, and more supports had cleanse. So if you target one support, the other support can save. It's the absence of the double support meta that makes blow up combos like that possible and potentially even meta. Other than that, Korea, I believe that was the only. In my mind, that was the only real upset series as well. So it is worth watching. If you want to see something a little bit less interesting, but it can give you an idea of what the current gap is in Korea, I encourage you to watch Ballistics versus Team Ace. 6 months with you now. Pay to sub to Prime, almost always running out on an off day. Well, thank you for the resub, Tarantula Hot. 6 months. Welcome back to the guest list. So I do recommend Tempest vs. KSB Black very heavily. I had a lot of fun watching that series, and you will too. HGCU Phase 1, Dignitas. Dignitas is far and away like the super team of EU this season. They have arguably the best or second best tank in the form of JPL. They have undisputedly the best offlaner in the form of Wubby, and possibly the best mind, draft mind in EU. Wubby has consistently been one of the most innovative and sort of thinking drafters in the scene in EU. And then the rest of their team is also just extremely solid. The only little bit of a, is this really going to work, is their replacement for Bakery, who was not a support player and was moved over to support. But we have to remember that Zelia was a support player in World of Warcraft. He has that mindset. He was an arena support player. And it's not really... like, I think being a support, the most important thing is your mindset and how you think about the game in terms of wanting to enable your allies instead of making plays for yourself. Method also came out swinging, doing very well. And the new Fnatic seems okay, if a little bit shaky. And everyone else is pretty much doing what you would expect. There was a lot of shakeups in the EU rosters. Definitely something to look into if you're a big fan of EU and are not aware of what the new rosters look like. But... and here's one of those weeks where I struggle. So some regions, some weeks, I struggle to recommend a game set. Because, especially in EU, there were so many interesting games, both in terms of the drafts and the narrative between the teams. It's really easy to be like, I'm going to recommend Dignitas versus Tricked because it shows how good Dignitas is. But the reality is those games were stomps. Game 1 was really interesting. They essentially ran a solo support Malfurion with a Tracer. So Tracer got very little, if any, support. But Pollock was not really doing damage to anyone for most of the game. He was just going on Hanzo. If Hanzo showed and tried to do poke damage, Pollock just went in and threw a bomb on him and then left. This doesn't sound like it'd be terribly effective, but the reality is Hanzo's very fragile. And it's his range and his ability to jump over walls that makes him very, very safe. But if you just can blink onto him from an unexpected angle and throw a bomb on him and he gets really chunked, he kind of has to leave the fight. And so it ends up being their 4-man versus the other 4-man. Game 1 wasn't really a stomp. It wasn't a stomp necessarily, but I think it was a one-sided draft, and Dignitas was... this is the thing. It didn't look that stompy, but Tracer scales so well, Leoric scales so well, that at some point, Dignitas is gonna be able to just start winning. All they have to do is just play even. Trick played very well. In fact, I would say Tricked is one of those teams where you just never know if they're going to be a top team or not. They're always just on the cusp. They're always literally just on the cusp of being a top team. So I really want to recommend Dignitas versus Tricked because Tricked played better than expected. They played very, very well. I think Dignitas was really cool and a little bit innovative in the way they were drafting. Just the way they decided to counter Hanzo, because it was just so high execution to do it the way they did, and it was hard and it was fun to watch, but it didn't end up being like a 3-0. So, but I'm still going to recommend it. The other series that would be fun to sort of watch is just the first Method versus Diamond Skin set, which is also a 3-0, but a lot of people I think were doubting exactly how good Method was going to be. And I think coming out strong like that with the 3-0 shows that we're in for some fun times in EU HGC. Really, really, really think you guys if you don't want to watch Dignitas versus Tricked, you should watch Method versus Diamond Skin. Pretty straightforward. Hey, J-How. Method versus DS just looked like Roba's not up to par with top EU tanks. That's honestly a very fair assessment. Moving over to NA, my home region. We have Tempo Storm and Freedom returning. Gale Force, of course, the team I coach, is back as well. Team 12, no longer associated with Roll20, and 20 minus 8 is 12. I know, your guys' minds are blown right now. Space Station Gaming, LFM, Simplicity, which was Old Gods, they have been picked up and sponsored, and of course Heroes Hearth, the team that made it in from the Crucible. LFM was brought in because Lag Force disbanded, so they were the number 2 team in the Crucible. Pretty interesting rosters, actually. The good news is that at least means Team 12 can do math. This is true. Now, this is kind of this is kind of a thing where I think every week people are going to be like, he's biased. And he's like, he's never going to recommend Gale Force esports games, or he's always going to recommend Gale Force esports games, what have you. But I'm not going to recommend Gale Force esports set. Either of their two sets this weekend, because we did play it 2 games. I'm actually going to recommend Tempo Storm versus Heroes Hearth. I like... Heroes Hearth is sort of an unknown quantity in terms of where do they really belong. There's like, we have Arthalon who's returning, and people are very split on Arthalon. He's either really good or really bad, depending on your perspective. Heroes Hearth, in a lot of people's opinions, had really odd drafting. They heavy prioritization on Leoric. People are like, why are they prioritizing Greymane and Leoric so highly every single game? But I think it highlights a lot of the problems with Volskaya in Game 4. And so I think it's interesting to watch for that reason. 6 months of enjoying the streams. Keep up the amazing work. Congrats on your first HGC weekend as a coach and not just as a viewer. Thank you for the resub. Happy for 077. Welcome back to the guest list. No Gale Force. I just don't think the Gale Force games were the most interesting games. And I'm not going to be biased towards my team. I'm always going to recommend the most interesting games for you guys. I think Tempo Storm versus Heroes Hearth was a really interesting series. It shows how good and how consistent Tempo is with their new roster. And it shows that they can make mistakes and lose, because they did, in fact, drop 1 game. But it also just shows how scrappy Heroes Hearth is, and how much some of them want to be there, and how crazy good Crowan is in particular. And highlights the newcomers to HGC, Ishbu and BBJ, both of whom did very well in their roles of support and tank. Really good synergy there. I think it's arguable that tank and support are currently the 2 most important roles in pro teams, and that your tank and support need to have really good synergy with each other, or you're going to struggle. And so I think that's Heroes Hearth's biggest strength right now, is they have a tank and a support who've been playing together for a long time. They have really good synergy. And then they have a player like Crowan who can also just do a lot of work and has a pretty diverse hero pool, despite the fact that he was always on Greymane. Greymane is, Crowan is no longer a one-trick hero. So those are my recommended series. Just some meta notes. Rhaegar was heavily prioritized in EU and Korea. Uther was prioritized in Korea. In NA, we pretty much saw a lot of Lucio and Malfurion, right? Didn't see a lot of the other regions' support picks. Other than that, the meta, I think that's the biggest difference, to be honest. Tyrael was prioritized quite a bit in Korea, and not so much in the other regions. But everyone sort of had some Tychus games. Everyone sort of had some Leoric games. Everyone had some Gul'dan games. Most regions are playing mostly the same heroes, and most teams were doing mostly the same heroes. So it seems like everyone, after the 3-month break and consistent scrimming, has sort of settled on the same sort of meta, and it's just that the priority is different. So I think that's really interesting personally, that we're sort of settling on a lot of the same heroes, but the priority is very different. I feel like Uther it's taken because of the stun and not because of the healing armor anymore. Could it be? Yeah, Uther is basically taken because of the stun. Point and click stuns are good, as it turns out, against certain heroes. Tychus being back, he has no changes and he used to be trashed here. Tychus was never that bad. The problem was Tychus was not a hyper carry. So you have to remember that for the entire last 6 months of the meta, in the world meta, double support was God. The only team that did not have a lot of success with double support was Fnatic, if you don't count Tassadar. Fnatic did not run double support. Fnatic is a team that's always playing their own meta, though. They're always doing their own things. But when you have 2 supports, and you have 2 supports, you have a tank, you have 2 spots left, right? Generally, one of them has to be an offlaner. One of them has to be someone who can catch soak on the other side of the map. So they need to have wave clear and self-sustain and independence, which leaves 1 spot. You have exactly 1 spot left. Is Tychus good enough to fill that 1 spot? No, absolutely not. Tychus doesn't do that level of damage. He just doesn't. He's not a hyper carry. So in the hyper carry meta, there was only a very, very, very few number of heroes that you could draft for damage. That's just the way the game was. Tychus didn't fill that requirement. Jaina didn't fill that requirement. Who else? Who are some other heroes? Like damage heroes. Chromie even didn't fill that requirement. I've seen some successful Hyper Tychus. I mean, I've seen some successful Hyper Carry Zarya too, but like, let's talk about the average. In most pro players' experience, these heroes just didn't work as hyper carries. So coming into 2018 with the support nerfs, you're going to see a lot more variety in assassins because we're only running one support, which literally doubles, not exaggerating, it literally doubles the room you have to have ranged carry backliners. So first question from the post-show Discord thing is, why is Jaina good now? Is just that double support was holding her down before? Yes. Jaina's a hero that really enables picks. She has reasonable wave clear, but in team fights, her damage doesn't stick. If you don't immediately blow someone up, her damage just isn't enough to kill someone through double support. But if you literally have the enemy healing available team, her damage is very sticky. You can do a full combo. Usually it'll get a kill if you set it up correctly, but if you mess up or the support makes a play and makes a save, you just come back, like especially post 13 with Icy Veins, you just push the Icy Veins button and you can re-engage in 7 to 8 seconds. All your cooldowns will be available again, and then you can kill someone. In double support, 7 to 8 seconds later, everyone's back at full health, and they can make that same play of making the save again. It doesn't work. Jaina's also has a lot of good talents that make her a little bit less susceptible to dive heroes like Greymane, including Arcane Armor, or Frost Armor, at 4. And her rework just was really good for her. She has 2 really powerful heroics. Water Elemental and Ring of Frost are both very good at doing different things. So, and it's not just Jaina, it's mages in general. We didn't see a whole lot of Kael'thas either. The only mage we really saw a lot of was Li Ming, and sometimes Chromie because Chromie was really good at anti-siege. And there were some funny combos you could do. Like Fnatic likes to do the loop gust combo, where you temporal loop one person if the enemy team doesn't have a cleanse, gust everyone away, and the loop brings that one person back, and suddenly you're in a 5v1. It's a variation of the tether ball with the butcher, which is a butcher Falstad combo. Thought it had more to do with countering mobile frontliners, and outside NA, this was what she was used for. Jaina is also very good against the mobile frontliners. So one of the things about double support that was a little underrated was it was almost impossible to kill tanks in the double support meta, because tanks already have defensive cooldowns. They already have their own CC, and they already have like their own self peel in a lot of cases, their own save mechanics. So if you put 2 supports to heal a tank, and you try and kill the tank, that's a great trade for the enemy team, because the tank's never going to die. You're going to burn a bunch of cooldowns. But without the double support meta, you can kill tanks again. If a tank makes any positional mistakes and you draft a tank killer composition, you can just kill the tank. Done. One team fight. Because a team fight without a tank is very, very, very rough to have at the pro level. So in other regions, Jaina was just drafted for her burst because you can kill tanks now. And then she also has wave clear. But it's really just Jaina's bursty, and she doesn't necessarily die to dive. It's really simple. I'm trying to get some 8-ball corner pocket popularized for Asmoglobe with Entomb. Thoughts? I mean, why not call it a cue ball corner pocket, right? Because it's on his Q, and it's... Of course, you wouldn't actually try to throw a Q into a pocket. I don't know. There's probably a pool joke in there somewhere. Almost no Sonya. There actually was a fair amount of Sonya in Korea. And Mercs, despite the fact that they were nerfed, are stronger. But look, you have Sonya, 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 Sonya. None of the top teams in Korea, except for Tempest, really played Sonya. Although, actually, I'm not even sure KSP plays. They saw lots of Sonya. And basically, all I have to say for Sonya is Mercs, despite the fact that they were nerfed, are still really important. And Sonya can do Mercs. You'll notice even in a lot of these games, if you go look at it, Sonya did not take Block. Block is the standard talent for winning 1v1. For winning lane trades, for being a soul laner. The standard talent for just doing Merc camps is Warpaint. And you go look at it, a lot of Sonyas took Warpaint. any bet Sonya was drafted for. Sonya was doing Mercs. If you go look at these games, Sonya was doing Mercs like a good majority of the game. Merking is incredibly important. You still need a Merking hero. So if you don't have Greymane, you don't have a Hanzo, you don't have even Rhaegar. Rhaegar's ability to do camps was significantly nerfed with the removal of Lightning Bond. It's 3 seconds slower at least. It might not sound like a lot, but 3 seconds is actually quite a bit when it comes to making map rotations. So Mercs are good. You need a Merker in every standard composition, I think, at this point in the game. Or you need so much wave clear that your team can like 3 or 4 man Mercs. Like just snap them out in between waves really, really quickly. But that is a lot of wave clear. Like you have to completely construct your draft around having that much wave clear. And except for maybe on Tomb, that's not like necessarily the safest strategy. So if you see a Sonya in a professional draft, probably she's going to be doing Mercs. That's where she is in the meta. Why the heck is Space Station putting 2 people in the mech? They didn't watch my video on how to correctly use the mech. For the record, Space Station was the only team that consistently put 2 people in the mech on Volskaya. Game 1, right here. And I'm not going to say that that's why they lost, but every time they put 2 people in the mech, they did lose a lot. They would lose team fights. They would lose map pressure on other parts of the map. Don't put 2 people in the mech. If you want to see Volskaya played what I think is pretty properly, go watch some of the EU games on Volskaya where if they got the mech, only 1 person was ever put in it. Don't put 2 people in the mech. Just don't do it. What wine did you drink to celebrate your first win as coach of GFE? I don't drink. That's not true. I drink very rarely. I certainly don't drink to celebrate, usually. Why is Tychus a real hero now? We only predicted he was a real hero that will see a good amount of play months ago. This is true, by the way. On the Discord, where we engage in some hypothetical discussion of what's coming up, I did not participate in the chat because I have insider info on what the meta is going to be, so it's not as interesting to like predict for me. But you don't drink? So here, I'm going to tell you guys a funny story completely unrelated to the HGC. I cook a lot, and it turns out lots of things have alcohol-soluble flavors that you can't really taste if you don't add some alcohol. Really easy examples, tomatoes. If you don't add a little bit of vodka or brandy or white wine here to when you're making like homemade tomato sauce, it's not going to taste as good. It just won't. Just take my word for it. Such a grumpy cat. So I always had a large amount of alcohol because I love cooking and to make these different recipes. And when I first got together with my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, she was like, "These bottles are also pretty. Why do you have them stuck in a cupboard?" And she made me a little display case on a table that I had for alcohol. And then people started bringing me alcohol because they would come over to my house. Diabetes, and give her the follow. And they would see all this alcohol and it'd be like, "Oh, Justin must like alcohol." And they would start bringing me alcohol. So I ended up with, I'm not kidding, like over 60 bottles of really nice alcohol of various kinds. And I actually like mixing drinks, but I don't drink that much. I have a glass of wine every so often. I have mixed drinks sometimes at parties. Yeah, that's my real name. My real name is Justin Foster. So I don't drink that much, but I have an enormous amount of alcohol, like literally thousands of dollars worth of alcohol. A little bit of a digression. Anyway, I don't participate in these discussions of theory crafting because I have insider information, but same reason. No double support. Tanks are killable. Tychus is really good at killing tanks. Epixor's Hots has been watching my channel for like a year and just now followed. I don't even know what's up. In the past, you've recommended a game from each region to watch. Are you going to start recommending a particular player from a particular game to watch in Korea? It's Lockdown. It's Lockdown or Rich. Like, you just watch Lockdown or Rich or Reset. They're just that much better. So for those of you who don't know, there is a new feature. Finally, a stream to sub again. Welcome back. 6 months in a row, Epic Source Hots. Thank you for the resub. Welcome back to the guest list. So There's a new feature for HGC Korea where they're streaming the individual perspectives of the players during the actual games. They're streaming them on their own individual Twitch channels, so if that streamer has VOD saved, you can watch it on the VOD. I know Rich has his VOD saved, but not every streamer has their VOD saved. So it's something you just have to go check on each individual streamer's account to see if you can do it. But watch your role. Like, if you are the tank or if you're the support, go watch, the KSV or Tempest or whatever. Watch their role. But if you just want to see some, really clean play, Lockdown played out of his mind. Like, absolutely out of his mind, in my opinion, in their series versus KSV. Thank you for the follow. Actually did not see who that was. Surprised about the Jaina picks? Nope. Not surprised by the Jaina picks at all. Killing tanks is really good. Heavy Burst is really good in metas where there's only one support, because you can't heal them back to full. What is the audio for those streams? It's just the game sounds. It's nothing else. So as a tank, should I be watching Tist or Sign? I think Tist is a little bit better than Sign right now at tanking, but Tempest is just better at executing their team fight. So if you want to start, if you're struggling with your team fight as a tank, I would watch Sign. If you're struggling with rotations and positioning in the laning phase of the game, I would watch Tist. Has KSV really fallen off that much, or was there 0-3 to Tempest a fluke? The 0-3 to Tempest was not a fluke, but KSV hasn't fallen off. There's always a danger. So here is the biggest risk with thinking you know the meta. For a long time, MVP Black only scrimmed against their sister team, MVP Miracle, so their meta was really undeveloped. They would only scrim against each other, so they would be very vulnerable to surprises. Also, Koreans in particular try to focus on very small hero pools, so that they're very, very good at the heroes. I think Tempest, in their run-up to the 2016 World Championship, played 3 heroes each total. That's it. So they played 15 heroes across 5 people. And they just always tried to build comps out of those 3 heroes. It was like, if you ban these 2, we're obviously going to go this, because this is the only thing that this one person can play. And without any competitive games since Gold Club, and with 2 significant patches since then, you're going to be in a situation where whoever predicts the meta better and practices that meta is going to win. And Tempest understood that Lucio was going to be really strong and he was going to be a heavy priority. So they were like, what if we just practice comps that beat the shit out of Lucio? What if we just did that? And they won. Tempest outdrafted KSV in at least game 2 and 3. I think they didn't outdraft in game 1. I think the draft in game 1 is very, very close. Everyone but Rich focuses on a small hero pool. Rich plays a lot of HOTS just for fun, and Rich will play pretty much every... And that's not even true. Rich doesn't play as many heroes as people think he does. It's just that some of the heroes he plays are so unusual. Like, he's really fond of Butcher, and you don't see a lot of Butcher. But Rich's hero pool is not as big as people may think it is. And if you ever see him play a support, wow, it can be painful to watch Rich play support. And I never thought I'd say that until I saw him play Malfurion for the very first time, and I was just, it was bad. So, first game, literally first game, of the HGC season. You can get in these situations where you didn't predict the meta correctly, and you can get pretty outdrafted. I think that's what happened. Should Gul'dan have been Chromie? To me, she accents the hook push first combo better than him. This was Method versus Diamond Skin, game 2. Should Gul'dan have been Chromie? It's first pick. So I don't think so. I don't think that the Chromie... Okay, so it's Tomb of the Spider Queen. Chromie is technically better at blow up, but the Gul'dan's better at wave clear, and it's Tomb of the Spider Queen. The thing I need to emphasize in Tomb of the Spider Queen that a lot of people don't get, and I'm including many pro teams when I say this, is you clear waves, then kill people. You don't kill people, then clear waves. Their combo is based on the hook hitting. If the hook misses, Chromie does, well, nothing. If the hook misses, Gul'dan still clears waves. Chromie is better for vision control in Tomb of the Spider Queen if you're running a very specific kind of comp where you're trying to control turn-ins, knowing that you're not going to have the early game wave clear advantage to potentially get some free drops. But that's not the method. That's not the comp they were planning to run. With the draft they had, what did Simplicity need to do to avoid getting rolled in Game 2 versus SSG? So again, Cursed Hollow. So this is the draft they had. Simplicity has Abathur Dahaka against Vikings. And literally the answer to this question, and it's going to sound so stupid, is not die. If Simplicity lets Genji pick them at any point, if either K1 Pro or Zuna die to the Genji, Space Station Gaming will get so much value that the game is over. It sounds stupid, right? Obviously, you never want to die anyway, so just saying don't die sounds completely like useless as information. But yeah, as long as Zuna doesn't feed, they're fine. It's literally what I'm saying. And they're actually relatively... So they literally just catch Muradin here. They're in a 4v3 brawl without their support. Don't 4v3 brawl without your support unless you're underneath your towers. So this is just outside the range of the towers, right? All they have to do is not fight unless they're under towers. And then they fought, and the pick happened. They got the counter kill, but you have to understand that every kill that Space Station Gaming gets is probably miss soak for Simplicity. Every kill that Simplicity gets is no miss soak for Space Station Gaming because of Vikings. So they had to play very carefully and win in the late game and just hold the early game without dying. And they died. That's the only thing they could have done to win, is just not die. And try to hold until the very late game. Doesn't Space Station Gaming look a lot better with Casa on tank and Equinox on melee flex? I mean, they went back and forth a couple times. I feel like I can say that they went back and forth a couple times on it in scrims, and I'm actually not sure which version of them looked better. I think also it's slightly hero pool related, so... Why did Glaurung get Primal Rage of 13-handed Haka instead of Primal Swarm in Game 2 of Tempo Storm versus Hero's Hearth? It's Tempo Storm versus Hero's Hearth, Game 2. Glaurung went the auto attack talent instead of the W vulnerability talent. You can kind of... This is like a question that you'd have to ask Glaurung in many ways, because it comes down to, in many ways, to personal preference. I will say that the auto attack talent is generally better for 1v1ing people, and slightly, like very slightly better for doing camps. And the Primal Swarm talent is better for wave clear, EW I'm Fabulous, and is better for 5-man focusing the same target. But you got to think about the fact that their comp has a Kael'thas. They're generally not going to be 5-man focusing the same target. Also, on any maps with a lot of bushes where you can get burrow flanks, Dahaka can just straight up 1v1 a backliner like Gul'dan. So I would say that Glaurung was probably thinking he could burrow in behind and just kill Gul'dan by himself. That's why he goes to that talent. Does McIntyre have other heroes in his pool than Leo? Was there a reason they picked him so suddenly? And whose Genji is so scary on Tempo Storm that HHE isn't banning him over ETC? McIntyre does have other heroes in his pool than Leoric. For whatever reason, Heroes Hearth decided to do a Leo-centric strategy. They probably thought it was strong. Here's something you have to consider. If you think you can beat a team with, by showing everything, maybe you show it. But in week 1, if you're up against a top team and you're not a top team, maybe you decide to go for one kind of draft and accept, you're either going to win with it or you're not, but you're not going to show anything else. And that's going to make week 2, 3, 4, and 5 much easier because you haven't shown any significant strats yet. Next people won't know what to prep to play against you. So yes, McIntyre plays lots of things besides Leoric. And whose Genji is so scary on Tempo Storm that HGC insisted on banning him over ETC? Tempo Storm has literally 3 Genji players that are all really good: Psalm, Glaurung, and Fan. It's always going to be, I think it's always going to be Psalm or Fan on Genji. But people, in my experience, and I include myself in this actually to some degree, don't understand how different Genji is at the pro level. A Genji at the pro level is very terrifying. A lot of cases you have to draft something specific heroes to deal with the Genji, or have a specific support structure, or have specific calls that you're going to make when Genji does certain things. A lot of the play becomes around the Genji. Not having Genji in the mix in many ways makes the draft easier. People aren't banning Genji because he's impactful, although yeah, he is. It's the old school Illidan problem. It was just so hard to it can be so hard to deal with him, and you have to start drafting so specifically for it. Uther is a really good solution, at least Koreas think so. They leave Genji open, and if one team takes Genji, they just take Uther. Is that good enough? Obviously, the Koreans, the results have been inconsistent, so I don't know. But I do think ETC is probably a little bit stronger than Genji at the pro level. ETC is a really effective... ETC is easily the most effective tank right now. I don't think anyone... it's not really news to anyone. Across all regions, ETC is just very, very strong. Although he was not prioritizing Korea, which I think is interesting. Why on earth is Glaurung going Aussie and Renewal level 1 on Leoric? This actually has a really good answer. So Chaos OS and myself both did the math at Leoric's rework on what was the strongest level 1 talent in terms of sustain. Field Team to Death is really good because you get it for your minions and the enemy team's minions. A lot of people don't know that. But it's actually still worse than just getting the heal from Q. Thing is, you can't guarantee the heal from Q unless the enemy person is in the minion wave, because you want to hit the minion wave with your Q because it's your wave clear tool and hit them. So sometimes you can't always get the consume vitality value. Aussie and Renewal, on the other hand, with the globe change, is actually better than any of them if you're consistently getting double globe. So if you just literally use it on cooldown for lane sustain and are constantly picking up double globe, which if you walk up to the globe and you start training someone, their normal response is to back up, you can sort of zone the globe. Well, then Aussie Renewal is suddenly the best sustain talent. Zhangha in Korea, who is arguably the best offlaner in Korea outside of Rich, also was going Aussie Renewal on Dragonshire. And you'll also notice that they frequently rotate down to mid and grab the globe there as well. Basically, if you're getting 3 to 4 globes per minute, which is pretty possible. It's easy with double rotation and quite possible when you're just bullying someone in lane. Aussie Renewal is more lane sustain. Whether or not it's better for the team fight later on is a completely different question. But it's better in lane. So that's why. Maybe the Koreans are prioritizing Murden over EC since he has been a more popular hero in their metas. Probably. I mean, there's no... It doesn't matter. You could have the most godlike drafter in the world, always knows exactly what counters what and how to build really strong compositions on a map-by-map basis, and you would lose every game if your team didn't know how to play the heroes. So it's always possible that teams are prioritizing heroes that they're comfortable on, and it's also always possible that sometimes you see really good drafts that lose because the teams drafted well and then didn't know how to play the heroes. Breeze is good at ETC, and ETC has always been the top tank in the EU meta in many ways. So, maybe Breeze is good at ETC because he practiced it a lot, and not because he just happens to be naturally good at ETC. Crazy thought, right? That practice matters more than natural ability. And I think that's actually a really important takeaway for a lot of teams, is if you're not playing heroes you're good at, it doesn't matter how good your draft is. How much of Freedom's 3-1 over GFE do you attribute to draft versus play? I mean, here, look at the... So this is the series, Freedom versus Gale Force Esports. I think our execution in game 1 was fairly questionable. We were sort of going on the backliners, but it was very difficult to kill either Yoda or Lutano. But I think the draft was okay. The execution was poor. We actually had game 2 won. Like, if we just gone straight... we won. We dominated game 2. This was a complete outdraft. I don't know exactly what Team Freedom was going for, but this comp didn't just work. Game 3, we actually should have won. Because if we'd just gone straight boss, we would have won this game, and then didn't. So that's not a draft issue. That's a play issue. And then game 4, I think we were outdrafted. So I would attribute 2 of our losses to misplays and 1 of our losses to an outdraft. Leftovers Artanis pick on Tomb. So there's going to be a lot of questions like this as this goes on. Why are people picking heroes that we don't expect? Artanis can Merc, although they already have Greymane for that. Artanis actually has fairly reasonable wave clear, especially with the level 7 talent that increases the reverse damage on his Q. Artanis can displace. Displacement is always capable of potentially getting picks, and it's something to think about when you have fragile, immobile heroes that are backline like Mene's Kael'thas or Quacknox's Junkrat, although whether or not Junkrat's immobile is debatable with his W. But I think Leftovers probably just felt comfortable with the Artanis. Potty Boss is probably like, I can play Artanis well, and they probably practiced it in scrims and had good success with it, and they brought it into a game and didn't win. Either that, I mean, and people are always going to accuse them of sandbagging, hiding strats and not picking real heroes because they're up against a team they don't think they can beat. I don't think, personally, that that's the case at all, but I think Potty Boss is just good at Artanis, and so they picked it. And that's going to be a thing that's going to happen all this season. People are going to pick heroes that they know a player on their team is good at because the player on their team is good at it, even if it doesn't make sense in the meta. Right? Because you have to account for personal performance on a hero. I would never be like, Tracer with Soul Sport Malfurion is good. But Dignitas makes it work because they have one of the best Tracer players in the world. It's really that simple. When is Genji's Q build better than Genji's E build? I think never. In terms of strict damage, Genji's E build is always better. The thing about Genji's Q build, particularly Shingen at 13, is it chunks tanks, and it chunks mercs, and it chunks structures. So if you're just like offlaning as Genji, like you're just pushing up a lane really, really hard because you can do so very, very safely, then you can start chunking buildings, which makes it really strong in Hero League environments, actually. And I actually did a stats analysis on this. For those of you who don't know, Hotslogs does record the score results, the end of game score results, and you can go look at them on average. A Master Grandmaster Genji does roughly the same amount of damage in an average game that a Pro Genji does in terms of hero damage. The difference is that Pro Genjis do almost 20,000 more siege damage. So, probably something to think about when you're playing Genji. Good Genjis soak a lot, and they actually do a lot of siege damage. And it might not seem like Genji has good wave clear, but a lot of times you're just like, nothing much is going on. I kind of need 10. No one's overextending. I can actually do a significant amount of structure damage. Alex Raza seems to have a start, but in my opinion, it seems more from execution, understanding of the hero, allies, and Alex player than weakness of the hero, although Junkrat and Infernal Shrines game look rough. Thoughts on whether she's truly HGC viable, especially if she doesn't have the ult that saves allies in the Vein of Divine Shield. I think Alex Raza is a really good tempo support. So her dragon is essentially an ultimate. It's the rag. It's the rag effect. Her dragon is essentially a heroic, right? So if you have a map that has a really strong objective and you can guarantee it with the dragon, she's suddenly really good. But if you have a map that like goes out over a long period of time and she's kind of like she's not good. She does also have acceptable wave clear. She's one of the few sports left with like acceptable wave clear. So I also think she's very hard to play with and to play in general because you have to have really critical, crisp decision making as a team for it to make sense. So I do think she's HGC viable, but I think you're going to see her limited to certain regions and certain teams and even certain maps that are willing to put in the time to learn her. Otherwise, they're just going to be like, nah, we're good. Out of curiosity, what meta do you think Artanis fits best into? Artanis is a surprisingly good solo laner. The problem is that he loses to a lot of the current meta solo laners. So probably in a meta where those solo laners were not as dominant. But he is good at, I think he actually is reasonable into the orc. Which I think is one of the reasons that Leftovers picked him there. Then you'll love my Genji and be able to catch up 70% of both waves while double soaking. Lol. Welcome back. Why are teams picking Johanna again? Is it because she can still wave clear and is it hard to kill? Teams pick Johanna for the same reason they always pick Johanna. Wave clear and her trait. And sometimes the blind. That's it. Those are like the three things. Arguably, if you need the blind, you should, and the wave clear, you should just kind of pick Arthas instead. But if you really need the unstoppable, or feel like you really need the unstoppable for some reason, then Johanna's better, which means she's better specifically into ETC. And sometimes you draft, backlines that just don't have a lot of wave clear, and you just need more wave clear. Also, Johanna Chromie is a really strong combination. It's stronger than most people think, because really coordinated Johanna Chromie play looks like this. Dragon's Eye gets thrown out. Johanna starts casting Condemn. Johanna pulls someone to where Chromie cast the W to prevent them from leaving the area. A good Johanna Chromie duo will guarantee Dragon's Eye hits every time. So don't only look for, they picked Johanna. Look for, they picked Johanna with this. Really obvious example is you can force the spread of Chain Bomb with Condemn. If you, two people are, we're Chain Bombed, we're going to start spreading apart, and they get Condemned back together, and then Chain Bomb spreads. You can force the value, and then the Kael'thas can throw down a Flame Strike where the Condemn is going to drag them, and you guarantee the level 7 talent that does percentage damage as well. Look for the synergies between Condemn and other heroes' kits, and then ask yourself if they needed wave clear. And then be like, was Johanna a good pick there? I think aside from the obvious Genji, Hanzo, Greymane, etc., I think it's cool that Leo, Tychus, Jaina are seeing good play. Yeah. Joe is a good tank for mages, is what you're saying? As an example. I think Joe's also a reasonable thing for Kerrigan, because you can do a multi-man combo off of a Condemn. Why do you think EU prioritize Rhaegar so much more than NA and Korea and Noob? Just style? I think EU prioritize Rhaegar more because of cleanse. And it's really what it comes down to. Rhaegar is the best of the rest supports that has cleanse. And it's really, you want Uther or Rhaegar. Rhaegar still has wave clear and Uther doesn't. See, we can actually go back here and look at the games where Rhaegar was prioritized. Like Sky Temple, they did it with Medivh. Medivh has no wave clear. Tyrael has no wave clear, really. Rhaegar, Greymane does Mercs. Chromie doesn't really have wave clear. Dahaka has wave clear, but he's the offlaner. I know there's one other Rhaegar game that I'm not. Oh, yeah. You don't need as much wave clear in Battlefield of Eternity, but Rhaegar still races the objective fairly well. And he can, his merking is not as fast as it was, but he still helps. If you have Rhaegar Tracer on a camp, that camp will get done fairly fast. So he does everything that he used to do, slightly worse, but he still has Cleanse. And then you can't, Cleanse is a get out of jail free card. It's really important. And EU in particular plays a lot more Chromie and Gul'dan and other, combinations that need cleanse. Like, if you don't have cleanse, you just lose. Also, KSV won game 2, or KSV lost game 2 against Tempest's comp because Lucio doesn't have cleanse and can't self-save. Right? There's no way to do that because he's so squishy. Rhaegar is not squishy. Rhaegar actually has a lot of health for a support. Why did GFE make me a liar? I don't even know if that's in relationship to, so I'm going to skip it. Tempo Storm scared me. Did they scare you? I don't know why Tempo Storm scared you. Tempo Storm's a good team. I'm not scared of them. Where do I think HHE stands? They bit back at Tempo except for game 1. HHE is... I don't think HHE, like all of their players, are at the same level of dedication. So I think their team is going to be inconsistent. But their highs are going to be really high. Like, I think that if there's any team that's likely to pull an upset, from my perspective, it's HHE. My Trolls G opinion placed that GFE was going to do well. I think we did do well for week 1. And in fairness, that series should have been a 3-2 at minimum. We really shouldn't have lost that Sky Temple game. But one bad decision can undo a lot of really good decisions. HHE versus Tempo Storm Volskaya game. Was Asmo a better pick than Nazeebo? Yes. Because Nazebo's not bursty. And you need to kill someone in the duration of the Silence and Tomb level 20 combo, which is 3 seconds. What do I think about the Zelia tweet on this game? The suggestion to put Asmo and Leo in the Triglav. I only think that'd be a good idea if Asmo leaves every 10 seconds and the Duncan goes back in. I don't think you should ever put 2 people in the Protector. I'm not exaggerating. It's always bad. You should just never do it. The only time you really want to put 2 people in the Triglav is if you have someone like Jaina who has really long cooldowns and she can get out and burn all her cooldowns and get back in. Asmo kind of fits that mold. So it wouldn't have been like the worst thing in the world. But HHE actually just needed to clear their base. If they had paid more attention to their waves, I think they would have won that game. Why is John the pick more than before? Talked about that. Why is Rhaegar more highly valued in EU but not for NA in Korea? Answered that. Why do I think EU is ignoring Jaina and Tychus even though Korean NA plays them a lot? I actually don't know why. Okay, actually that's not true. I know why. In Korea, the meta has always been kill the tank and then dive the backline, because without a tank, without peel, the backline's going to die anyway, right? So Korean fights always look very chaotic, but really they're just trying to outplay the tanks. They're always a very tank-centric thing, which is why Muradin is very popular in the Korean meta, because Muradin's not squishy and ETC is. Whereas EU has like more of a chess match style approach to the game. Like, we're going to clear waves. If this person's out of position, we'll get them. But otherwise, we're gonna clear waves. We're gonna back up here. We're gonna grab this camp while watching this, and then we're gonna move over here, and we're gonna clear this wave, and then we're gonna. It's not, and one of these styles is not necessarily better than the other one. However, NA is a far more aggressive region, so we like as a rule, the players copied the Koreans and didn't copy the EU players, which means that inadvertently. NA has also sort of gotten into this kill the tanks mindset, or kill out of position, heroes that just overextend, which everyone does that. That's just a thing. And when you're killing tanks, Jaina and Tychus are better than not Tychus Jaina. Why'd you draft Zeratul against Team Freedom game 1? I think we just wanted to kill Hanzo. I think we were just trying to kill Hanzo with the Zeratul and it didn't work. Is Malf Tracer only working because the Malf rework with the burst heal option, or would it have been worked before without second support? You have to have a really good Tracer player, is what it comes down to. And the Tracer has to do basically nothing and have one target. They're just trying to zone out of the fight. So you're essentially, Tracer doesn't do anything except zone the one guy. The one guy gets zoned, and then you're in a 4v4. That's the Tracer. You have to have a really good Tracer for that to work. Why is Leoric so highly valued right now? Because his 13 and his 16 is fucking absurd. He doesn't necessarily win any solo lanes, but he ties a lot of them, and he can double soak with the level 4. What is the idea behind the Kerrigan Tychus pick on Game 5 of GFE against Simplicity? It's a lot of damage. It kills tanks. Wouldn't some follow-up burst have been better? Tychus is really bursty. I don't like if you can actually have Tychus stand still and just auto attack. Tychus is really bursty. So if Kerrigan drags someone in, right? That's already like you immediately hit your D as the drag starts, and you just start D'ing them. That's like 2 to 3 seconds of full D value. That's a lot of damage. Tychus is not like a not burst hero. The problem is that his burst involves standing perfectly still. He can't move while bursting a target. So if you bring things to him, great. If he has to chase them down, you're fucked. Very, very different scenarios. Why haven't we seen any Samuro in NA despite several teams practicing Samuro? I actually don't know why other teams haven't been picking Samuro, because I mean, they have been practicing it in Hero League, so it seems strange. Maybe they just decided that it was worse than other things. What are my thoughts on some different Hanzo builds? So there's actually this is a regional distinction. There's some big things about Hanzo. So in hey, Dim Monkey, in EU, pretty much everyone is going Redemption, Wave Clear on Q, and then Sharpened Arrowheads for reduced armor, and they're team fighting with Hanzo. In Korea and NA, people are going W build, and they're just shredding mercs. It's just like once you're at level 7, you can do a merc camp in like no time at all. You have literally the fastest boss of any composition ever in Heroes of the Storm. There's no way to do bosses faster except when they were bribable, right? And ever remember that bug where bosses were bribable? I remember. Played a lot of Nova. So it's just a difference in emphasis. EU is playing a slow, careful style where they're clearing waves and poking people down. And NA and Korea are playing let's just do shitloads of camps and then burst people. Different styles. I actually think both are quite strong. And I think really good Hanzo players are going to be able to play both builds, and bad Hanzo players will only be able to play one build or the other and won't know which situation is better for which build. I do think the W build is significantly harder to play, because you have to get the bounces to work for you in team fights, and if you don't, you're just... It was technically only Warhead. What do I think of Korea having such a high priority on Garrosh? One, two, three, four. Oh, so Garrosh was played in 6 games. And he was drafted in the 2-3. It's not like he was ever first picked. And he was drafted on maps that had like a reasonable number of chokes. Battlefield of Eternity. You can solo defend the Immortal as Garrosh in some cases by throwing people into stuns. Tomb of Spider Queen, just watch turn in, throw people away from it. Infernal Shrines, very, very choke oriented. Dragonshire, rotational based, easy to get picks. Battlefield again. I think it's a little strange, but clearly it's working for them. And my best bet is that it has a favorable matchup into a specific tank. Considering it's Korea, my bet would be ETC. They probably feel like Garrosh is good, or Garrosh is good into Murden, excuse me. That would be my best guess, is that for whatever reason, Koreans feel like Garrosh is good into Murden, so they take Garrosh to preemptively deny Murden. Because look, Murden wasn't picked or banned, and he's usually a heavy priority in Korea. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But it doesn't. It also sort of seems like the team that was the lower tier teams were the teams doing it. It was not the higher tier teams. So maybe it had good success with them in scrims. The lower tier teams in Korea have always had bad positioning because of being overly aggressive. They're just overly aggressive with their positioning, and Garrosh does still punish that. So that's probably a good part of the reason. What do I think about W build Hanzo with Redemption level 1 versus Simple Geometry? That build seems very reasonable to me, honestly. Like, very reasonable, because you're increasing your attack speed, which increases the value of your level 7. The critical part is you need to have the ability to consistently auto attack, which your range makes that like reasonable to think is possible. But you also have to have like a nice front line and a good support who's babysitting you, like lots of things. Hanzo is probably the only hyper carry left in the game in a lot of ways, the way his numbers are currently tuned, but he needs some babysitting. Wouldn't Lily be better than Rhaegar because her new cleanse grants Unstoppable? Rhaegar's cleanse also grants Unstoppable. Rhaegar's cleanse is like the original cleanse that grants Unstoppable. I don't understand the question. Okay. I think he might be thinking of Malfurion. That's all the questions from the post-show question. I'll now open it up to questions on purpose that I'm answering from Twitch chat instead of just happen to be topical. I'll give you guys a few minutes for questions, and then I'm going to call it a day. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. I really miss doing HGC post-shows. I'm talking about the meta. It actually is quite difficult to do this show now and not necessarily talk about some things that I know from scrims and other things, but it wasn't as hard as it was. In some ways it was harder than I thought it would be, because like I'm so excited but to tell you guys what's going on. But in some ways it was easier because it was really, in my mind, it was really clear, like if I got information from this, I can't say it, but if I have information from just my own thoughts and watching the games, then it's very, very easy. Or if I got information from like G-Clef, that's like a caster information from Korea, so I can talk about that. Is there any chance you could get Kala to guest on one of these shows this season? Probably not. Kala, as far as I know, is at work. I would have to change the time. Maybe if I did an evening version. Maybe if I did it on like Monday night sometime after scrims. That'd be really late though. But I guess people could watch the VOD. Let me see if I have let me see if I can make something happen. I have a question less related to HGC. I just took over coaching my team, and I was wondering if you have any tips or things you should be focusing on doing. Yeah, comms. If you're coaching a team, also I usually don't recommend coaching your own team. Like if you're on a team and you're trying to help everyone get better, that can be in a rough position because of various reasons. Human psychology, I won't go to it. But if you're coaching a team, I think the first thing you need to focus on is comms. Because if you have really good comms and really good communication, then every other error in play becomes really obvious. Whereas if you have bad comms, sometimes things can be bad and you won't realize they're bad. Heroes of the Storm is an incredibly team-centric game. Everyone needs to be doing the same thing for the same reason at the same time, all the time. Why do you think Kharazim has fallen off so hard after being highly contested at BlizzCon? I think teams are just prioritizing other supports over him because his power spike is so late. Like he doesn't get cleansed till 16, right? That's a really big deal. His dash cleansing touch is at 16, and for the first little bit of people scrimming, there was a lot of early game losses because of the patch. And then it took a while for people to reorient and get back to, okay, now we can consistently get the late game again. I think you're probably actually going to see a slight resurgence of Kharazim, at least from some teams. But people are playing Kharazim. He's not like not getting drafted at all. He's just getting drafted less. And Kharazim was very good at adding damage to double support comms, which is one of the reasons he was highly contested. How do you improve on comms without having a coach? Some things you need to improve on comms are make sure you're always narrating what you're doing. Like, you can practice narrating what you're doing when you're playing by yourself in Quick Match or Hero League or whatever. You don't necessarily have to be on a team. Like, the important thing is just to let your shot caller always know what's going on with you. So if you're like off laning, be like, I took a good trade, took a bad trade, I had a tap, I had to back, I'm gonna miss some soak, I'm getting a tower. Like, just narrate what you're doing, and anytime what you're doing changes, say it out loud. And then your shot caller knows what you're doing. Seems really obvious and simple. It's surprisingly difficult. It takes a lot of practice to have good comms. Comms and rotations is the number one thing I always try to get my teams to work on, and it seems to work. I've been able to bring together teams that nobody's compete against top HGC Open teams. Yeah, it makes a big difference. Do replay review with your team so that you can work on improve decision making. And don't be afraid to play against better teams and lose. You honestly learn more from losing than you do from winning. That's my number one piece of advice to people when they're starting any competitive endeavor, like literally any competitive endeavor. You'll always learn more from losing than you will from winning. And therefore, the fastest way to learn is to make as many mistakes as possible, as fast as possible. But you have to correct the mistakes after the fact. That's the part that people miss. You have to make the mistake. You have to analyze it and realize why it's a mistake. And then you have to correct it. There's like an order of operations. Lots of people make the mistake, don't realize it's a mistake, keep making the mistake, and wonder why they're losing. You got to have data and then analyze the data and then act on the data. I see the mistake and keep doing the same mistake because I suck. See, that's the attitude. That's not what we would call a growth mindset. You gotta have a growth mindset if you really want to improve. A good example of that narration is some popular streamers. I think it's why competitive players start streaming all the similar in-game mannerisms to stream like Dunk, Chewit, or Grubby. Yes. It's not a coincidence that a lot of pro players who stream and narrate their actions as they're playing happen to be really good pro players. It's because they're actually practicing comms. They're actually practicing comms as they play Hero League. And it makes them significantly better players at the pro level. Because there are easily people in Hero League, especially if you limit it to like certain heroes. Like, there's some Kerrigan mains that are better than Psalm on Kerrigan in Grandmaster Hero League. Like, straight up better than Psalm. But if you took them and put them on tempo on Kerrigan in like a tempo comp, would it be better? And the answer is no, because they don't have comms. Like, they're not talking about what they're doing to their team. How do you suggest to analyze a replay without the aid of a coach mentor? Some good ideas are like, should you win? So like, you can go into my Discord channel, like the Nexus Schoolhouse, where people are always theory crafting, post a draft and be like, who should have won? And then people will be like, well, blah, blah, blah wins top lane. And then you can go in the replay and realize, this is a very common thing for Hero League replays, we weren't in top lane. The correct person was not solo laning, and therefore they didn't have the winning lane matchup. Or we weren't doing mercs when we had a gray main. Or we didn't rotate when we had an ETC to potentially secure picks on the rotation. We were just sitting in lane instead. And then you can be like, okay, I wasn't doing any of these things that are obvious to these better players. I can now go do those things, and then I can analyze that replay and be like, am I doing these things better? A really good thing to look for. This is actually the number one thing I talk to people about when I'm doing like replay review is, were you doing something? Like, were you clearing a wave? Were you doing a merc camp? Were you in a team fight? Were you going to an objective? Whenever you weren't doing something, were you mounted? Like, that's just a really easy thing. Bronze players will literally not mount in a lot of cases. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I've done bronze replay reviews where the player did not mount. They were just never mounted. They knew what mounting was. They just kept forgetting that you could mount. If you're not doing anything, mount. It's real simple. And up to, I've had replay reviews for up to Masters players who were mounted probably half the time they could have been mounted. HOTS is extremely fast paced. You should always be doing something. Be mounted. My mechanics are so bad for a diamond player. What do you suggest to improve? I think it's always erroneous to say my mechanics are bad. You can say my mechanics are bad on a specific hero. For instance, my Greymane mechanics suck. I'm just not good at playing Greymane. My Greymane mechanics, for whatever reason, are just like, oh my god, they're so bad. And I actually have a lot of games on Greymane, but he doesn't click with me for some reason. Like, his mechanics are not my mechanics. I have really good mechanics on Jaina. I actually have a lot more games on Jaina, which is part of the reason, but I actually have always just been Jaina sort of intuitively makes sense to me. I have good mechanics on Jaina. I have bad mechanics on Muradin. I have good mechanics on Tyrael. Tyrael's actually harder mechanically than Muradin. So why are my mechanics on Tyrael good and my mechanics on Muradin bad, right? Just mechanics vary in difficulty and intuitiveness per person, per hero. So don't say you're bad mechanically. Say I'm this on this hero, I'm this on this hero, I'm this on this hero. If you want to improve your mechanics on a specific hero, figure out what the mechanics are for that hero that are objectively capable of being improved. Like on Dahaka, drag accuracy. Easy way to tell if you're making good decisions on Dahaka. Are you burrowing into fights to get a kill or to save your team? Dahaka doesn't peel. Dahaka doesn't peel. So if you're burrowing into a fight to save your team, that's wrong. You should burrow into a fight to kill someone, to like straight up help your team just kill someone. And in order to do that, you need to hit your Q, and you need to burrow into the right bush and get the right flank and read the fight correctly. So there's some game sense there, and some mechanics there, and they're very different things. Doesn't it translate? Not in my experience. There is a player in Korea who reaches GM every single season with an 80+% win rate on Vala, and a sub 20% win rate on every other ranged hero, including Tychus and like Genji. The mechanics, in my experience, don't translate because it's a combination of the mechanics and the judgment, and the judgment doesn't translate, even if some, but not all of the mechanics do. Like Illidan's a good example. That Vala player plays Illidan, stutter steps well. You know, doesn't miss his W's for the battered assault procs. Does a lot of work, but the reality is that he doesn't know when to go in and dies too much. Lack of judgment. Judgment and mechanics have this weird blurry intersection. It's like our Artanis main. Artanis players who have like 200 games in Artanis and hit the swaps like 75% of the time. Those guys are scary. They're so terrifying. An Artanis player who plays Artanis occasionally and hits like 10% of his swaps, you're like, why is this guy even... And usually when they swap into the wrong place and die. Or the Artanis players who can use their swap as an escape to like consistently get over terrain, but they're always hitting it when it really matters. Like, that's a big difference. You can improve mechanics by going into try mode and grinding it. You can improve mechanics by going into quick match and grinding a hero. In my assessment, it takes about 100 games to be really good at it, to be like good at a hero. If you've ever played less than 100 games in a hero, you can be better mechanically. You can be better at that hero. You can be better at judging win those situations. That's not only a personal opinion. It's backed up by the math on MMR versus hero level performance that Ghost Dunk did initially. It's about, not counting a stim pack, it was about level 10. It was about level 10 where that was about 100 games, and that's when you started to get like really good at a hero. And sometimes you just have to accept that you're going to be better at certain heroes. Like, I've accepted that I'm never going to be as good at Greymane as I am at Jaina. I think I have a problem with highly mobile heroes. Like, the constant decision-making that they need is a little bit different from the patient sort of waiting style of play, where you're just looking for that one perfect opportunity. So it's another reason I'm worse at auto-attackers than I am at mages. I'm generally worse at all auto-attackers than I am at mages in general. I'm a pretty good Chromie player. I'm a pretty good Leaning player. I'm a pretty good Jaina player. I'm not a good Greymane player. I'm not a good Vala player. I'm pretty good at tanks, because tanks aren't necessarily very mobile, and there's a lot of decision making, but it's like, you have to think of it in advance. You're like, if they do this, I'm going to do this. It's like, it's more like, I also think of playing a tank is more like playing chess. I honestly use so many patches to make up for my mechanics. And you can. There's lots of things you can do. All right, well, that's the HGC post show number 1, 2018. We got a little bit off of track for HGC things. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week with China. More discussions of the meta and more game recommendations for if you don't want to watch every single HGC game. Thank you guys for watching, and remember, this is a stream where we never lose, we always win, or we learn something. Learning is always a win. Have a good night, everyone.